I met a guy on Tinder several years ago, who we'll call Jeff. I was 25 at the time, and Jeff was 32. We had gone on 3 dates in public, and things were going quite well. He was a little awkward, but in an endearing way. That's what I thought at the time anyway. We had gone out for drinks twice, and went bowling for our 3rd date. Eventually, he invited me over to his place for dinner. I knew he had a roommate, because it came up in our conversations. 32 is a bit old to have roommates, but I live in a city where rent is very high, so it's actually not that uncommon. Jeff had told me that he and his roommate Chris were friends from college, and they had lived together on and off for a long time. He also mentioned that they hadn't been getting along lately. The day came, and I drove to the address Jeff had given me. It was a decent-looking house in a fairly nice neighborhood. It was a single-story duplex. I parked my car on the street, since there were already 2 cars in the driveway. I remember feeling a bit nervous, but excited as I rang the doorbell. Jeff answered the door with a big smile. As soon as I stepped into the house, I noticed there was basically no decoration of any kind. It was a typical guy house, except I would have thought that in his 30s, Jeff would have developed a bit more style. The living room was just a giant TV with a leather couch and a reclining chair, literally nothing on the walls. He led me to the kitchen, where dinner was partially prepared already. I helped finish it, and while we were waiting, we sat on the couch in the living room. Then I heard a loud noise from down the hall. It was like a thud of some kind. I asked Jeff what it was. He said he didn't know. Then he got up and walked towards it. I knew his roommate Chris was home, so I figured it was him. Moments after Jeff got up, I heard arguing from the other room. I guess the 2 of them were fighting. I was feeling awkward that I had walked into the middle of a roommate war, but I wasn't ready to write off the evening just yet. Jeff came back and apologized. He told me he'd been having some problems with his roommate and was hoping that wouldn't happen. I told him it was okay, and we continued the evening. When dinner was ready, we sat at the kitchen table. Conversation was sparse, and I felt like I was forcing it. Jeff was visibly uncomfortable, and I thought it had something to do with his roommate. Suddenly, I heard the door open down the hall, and a stomping pair of footsteps came towards us. Before I knew it, Chris was standing in the kitchen, and he was yelling at Jeff. Every part of me wanted to leave that place. It felt so wrong that I was there. They went at it for a good 5 minutes while I was just sitting there silent. Chris was standing over Jeff, who was still sitting down. At one point, Jeff tried to stand up, but Chris shoved him down before he could. Then Jeff grabbed his steak knife from the table and raised it towards Chris. Chris took a step back and said,
"So what? You gonna effing stab me?"
Jeff then got up and put the knife to his friend's neck. Chris kept moving back until he hit the wall, but Jeff didn't stop. Before I knew it, the 2 of them went to the ground. Jeff was on top. I didn't see exactly what happened, but I did start to see blood. Someone was cut, and I was pretty sure it was Chris. Maybe it was an accident, and he cut him in the commotion, but still, my date literally stabbed his roommate right in front of me. I couldn't believe it. That was enough for me. I got up and headed for the door. On my way, I took a look at Chris. He was still on the ground, but not bleeding badly. It looked like the knife cut him on the arm. When I was on my way out, Jeff tried to convince me to stay. He was standing in front of the door, still holding the bloody knife. I put my shoes on and walked right past him. I was worried that he would stop me, but he let me go. Once outside, I rushed to my car, my hands shaking as I tried to unlock it. Jeff followed me and tried to grab my arm, but I managed to get inside and lock the doors. I started the car and drove off as fast as I could, not even looking back. As I was on the road, I tried to think about what to do. I didn't know if I should call the cops. It seemed like the 2 of them were the same kind of crazy. If Chris wanted to call the cops, then that was on him. I was just glad to be gone, and I didn't want to deal with those psychos again. Needless to say, that was my last date with Jeff. A few days later, he sent me a message asking me out again though. I could hardly believe his lack of awareness. He was actually expecting another date after that. Maybe there are some girls that are attracted to dangerous guys, but not me. A guy who's capable of stabbing his friend is capable of all kinds of horrible things, and I don't want anything to do with that. I was using some dating apps a few years ago, but I didn't have a lot of success. Matches were rare for me, but I didn't let it get to me. Dating was not my main concern at the time, so I was okay with only getting a few dates in the last 6 months. One day, I matched with a girl named Amanda on Tinder. She had a great sense of humor, and after a few days of chatting, we decided to meet up for a coffee on the weekend. Amanda suggested a place in our town and a walk in the park afterwards. I didn't know the area very well, but when I looked it up on Google, it was not the nicest place. In my city, the East End is known to be rough, but there are some newer buildings there. They're trying to turn things around in that part of the city, but it's still not a good neighborhood. When she suggested it, I agreed because I was really more interested in getting to know her. We kept in touch throughout the week, sending a few messages back and forth each day. When the weekend came, I was feeling excited and also nervous. I don't date much, so I always get a little bit nervous. I arrived a bit early, ordered a coffee, and found a table outside. There was a large patio next to the sidewalk where I could wait for her. I would have a good view from there. Right on time, I saw her walking up the sidewalk towards the cafe. She was just as beautiful in person as she was online. It was pretty late for a coffee date. I think it was 8 p.m., and the cafe was about to close. As it was getting dark, we weren't ready to end the evening, so we decided to take a walk in the park, like she suggested. As we walked there, I was feeling uneasy. This was a part of town where you don't want to be after dark. I wanted to be tough and manly, though, so I didn't say anything. The park was actually beautiful at night, with street lamps on the paths. I was expecting it to be a little more sketchy looking, but I guess the city had done some work on it. We walked along, talking for a while. There were a few other people around there at the front of the park. As we kept walking, the paved path turned to gravel, and the lights were fewer. I was starting to get nervous. At one point, I wanted to turn around. I told Amanda that we should head back to where we were, but she insisted that we keep walking because she wanted to see the trees on the far end. I was hesitant, but caved to the peer pressure. We were walking down the less crowded path. There was a forested area to the right and an open field to the left, and the last lamppost was at least 100 feet back. We were almost on the farthest end of the park when two men appeared out of nowhere. They were hooded, and one of them had a knife.
Give me your money and your phones.
One of them demanded. His voice was low and creepy, like he was trying to disguise it for some reason. The shock hit me like a punch to the gut. I had never been mugged before. My first instinct was to protect Amanda. I remember telling her to stay calm and that we would just give them what they wanted. I reached for my wallet, trying to keep my hand steady, then I handed it over, along with my phone. Amanda did the same. The muggers grabbed our belongings and ran off into the night, disappearing as quickly as they appeared. For a few moments, Amanda and I just stood there, not saying a word. I was honestly almost crying. My hands were shaking and I couldn't stand still. My breathing was all over the place as well. It was a terrifying experience. Then I looked to Amanda. I was amazed at how calm she seemed. At the time, I thought she was just super tough. Of course, I wanted to call the cops, but both of our phones were gone. We had to find help. We hurried back to the cafe, but it was closed. There was a convenience store next door, so we went in and asked them to call the police for us. When they arrived, Amanda explained what happened. I was hyperventilating behind her. I was still having a hard time getting calm. You see that kind of thing in the movies, but being threatened with a knife for real is an experience that I was not ready for. The police seemed sympathetic, but not that hopeful that our muggers would be caught. They had been quick, and their faces were hidden. The police drove us home. By midnight, I was feeling calm enough. That's when I opened the Tinder app on my laptop. They have a website too that I use sometimes. I was going to see if Amanda was on, a long shot since her phone was stolen too. I was hoping she had another way to get on, but the first thing I noticed was that she had unmatched me already. It was confusing for a few minutes. For one, I was kind of surprised she even had access to her account, and second, we had just gone through a mugging together. The date wasn't amazing leading up to the robbery, but I thought that she would stay in touch. As I replayed the evening in my mind, I began to suspect that she may have been in on the robbery from the start. She was the one to suggest the spot where we met, and she was the one who insisted on walking further into the park. She was also suspiciously relaxed after it happened. To this day, I'm not sure if she set me up, but there are more than a few signs that make me think she was in on it. I didn't bother calling the cops to tell them my suspicions. I know it sounds like I've been spending too much time in my tinfoil hat, but I can't help but wonder. A few months later, I actually saw Amanda on a different dating app. I tried to connect with her again, but there was no response. I'm not sure what to make of that. Maybe she didn't want to risk getting caught for what she did before, or maybe I was too cowardly on our first date, and that turned her off. My name's Darcy, and this happened to me about a year ago when I was 24. I was using a few dating apps around that time, and Tinder was one of them. I was looking for a long-term relationship back then, so Tinder may seem like a strange choice. The way I see it, though, is it's just a way to meet new people. Whatever happens after that is up to me. One evening, I was sitting in my apartment after work. The TV was on, and I had my phone out swiping on Tinder, mostly left swipes, but occasionally one would catch my eye. One of them was Sam. The reason he stood out for me was that he had good pictures, and when I swiped right, we matched immediately. We talked for an hour. His messages were funny and clever, and he asked me out. I agreed to meet up for drinks. We kept talking for a while longer, and I found out that he lived near my work, so we decided to meet around there. On Thursday, we chatted a bit more when I was on my break, and Sam confirmed that we would get together at a pub that was just down the street from my work. When I was leaving my office, he messaged me saying he was there. I walked to the place quickly, not wanting to leave him waiting for too long. When I got there, I walked in and looked around, kind of nervous that he would look different than his pictures. I had met a guy before who must have been at least 10 years older than he said, and another who must have used fake pictures. When I laid eyes on Sam, though, he looked fine. The pictures must have been pretty recent, because he was even wearing the same shirt as he was in one of the pictures. He was sitting down, so I couldn't tell if he lied about his height, but I was pleased so far. Sam had short blonde hair, and he was muscular. He was 35 years old, so older than most guys I would date, but not a big deal. I sat down at the table, and we ordered. It was a strange date, but it wasn't going badly. Sam was funny and charming, but he seemed uninterested in me. I don't think he asked a single question about me. It was all jokes and stories. An entertaining night, but I was hoping we would get to know each other more. That being said, I was having a pretty good time, and I was even thinking that I would see him again. We only had a single drink, and then ordered some food. By around 11, we decided to go. I was about to call an Uber when Sam stopped me and offered me a ride home. His place was right around the corner, so I was surprised by the offer. I accepted anyway, thinking it was a nice gesture. We walked to his building and went into the underground parking garage. We were alone in there, and I felt nervous. I was concerned that it was a ploy to get me into his place, but that didn't happen. We got into his car, and we started to drive. As we were turning out of the garage, Sam asked me where I lived. I had not gotten specific before then. I told him the neighborhood, and he started driving there. As we were on the road, I decided it would be smart not to give him my actual address. Instead, when we got to my neighborhood, I asked Sam to drop me off at a 7-Eleven that was a few blocks away. As soon as I said that, he looked at me in a surprised way.
So you don't want me to know where you live, huh?
He said. I stayed silent for a few long seconds. To be fair, that's exactly what I was thinking, but I didn't know how to say it in a non-offensive way. I could tell he was angry, and I knew he was serious. I looked at Sam, and his eyes were red. He was watching the road, but still looking at me occasionally. No, I just need to pick some things up on my way home, I tried to lie. He wasn't buying it though. When we drove past the 7-Eleven, I knew I was in trouble. I told him to stop the car, but he refused. That was when I began to cry. He was speeding, and he wouldn't listen when I said I wanted to get out. I didn't want to do it, but I had no choice but to call for help. I pulled out my phone and unlocked it. As soon as Sam saw the colorful screen, he tried to swipe it from my hand. I pulled away just in time and managed to keep it. I knew he wanted to hurt me, but he couldn't do much with the car moving. I'm sure he knew that if he stopped the car, then I would have a chance to get out. We had turned onto one of the side streets, and there were no traffic lights there, so we didn't stop moving at all. I leaned over to the side and tried to call 911. Just then, Sam pleaded with me to stop. I told him that if he let me out, then I wouldn't tell anybody. It was an absolute lie, but I was willing to say anything in order to get out of that car. I promised that I wouldn't call the cops, and then Sam pulled over and I stepped out onto the dark sidewalk. When I was on the street, Sam tried to apologize. A few cars lined up behind him as he was stopped there pleading with me. I told him it was okay, anything to get away from him. Finally, Sam disappeared into the distance, and I was very relieved. I ran home as soon as he was gone. As soon as I closed my door, I called the cops. They sent someone out to talk to me. I told them that I was basically kidnapped because of what happened. I gave Sam's contact info to the police, and then they left. It would have been easy to let this one go, but I think I owe it to all the others out there to report this kind of thing. I later found out that the cops were not able to arrest Sam because he denied it. My word against his was not good enough. Even still, it's important to report things like this because there needs to be a record of the complaint. So if he ever tries something like this again, then maybe the next person will be taken more seriously than I was. This happened about 10 years ago when I was in my third year of college. I was living in a house off campus with 2 roommates back then. This was around the time when Tinder became popular in my area, but it was still seen as an unusual thing to do. So when I set up my profile, I was kind of embarrassed. I still thought it was worth a try though, because there were no girls in my social circle who would have been interested in dating me. Believe me, I tried. After setting everything up and taking some selfies, I started swiping. The first thing I noticed was that there seemed to be a lot of fake profiles. Many of them were pictures of celebrities or models. I don't think they did a good job of filtering those out back then. Maybe it's still like that, I don't know. One of my first matches was a girl named Dee, who said she went to my school. I was skeptical at first, but everything seemed to check out. I was even able to find her on Facebook. We didn't have any friends in common, but the profile looked real and the pictures matched. We messaged on the app for a few days, then I asked her out for drinks. She said yes right away, and we made plans to meet at a bar. The day of our date came, and I got ready. The bar was just down the street from my house, so I arrived early and waited for her near the entrance. It was raining that day, but not hard. Right on time, Dee walked up, and she looked just like her pictures. Most of my nerves melted away when I first laid eyes on her. We went inside and ordered some drinks. Within another 5 minutes, I was completely relaxed. Things were going well, and any thoughts I had of a scam or a prank had melted away. While we were talking, Dee asked me if I would walk her home that night. I agreed right away. I was thinking that it was good that she trusted me enough to do that. It was starting to get late, and we were about to call it a night when my phone started going off. It was my mom, so I stepped aside and answered it. There was a minor family emergency that I won't go into detail about. In any case, I told Dee that I had to go and apologized for not being able to walk her home. I ordered her an Uber, and we said our goodbyes. I ran home after that and called my mom back. The next day, Dee and I kept chatting on the app. We still hadn't exchanged real phone numbers yet. I asked for hers, but she ignored the question. That didn't bother me, because I thought she was just being cautious. We did, however, set up another date for the following weekend. We were going to meet at a park in our city at 8 p.m. on a Saturday. It was her idea, and I thought it was odd to meet at a park late at night, but I was up for anything. We had hit it off the first time, and I was excited to see where things would go. Later in the week, I was sitting around my house talking to one of my roommates, John. By then, I admitted that I was using Tinder and told him about Dee. I showed him the pictures, and he seemed impressed. I also told him that we went out once already and had plans for the weekend. I thought he would roast me a little bit for being on a dating app, but he didn't seem to care. When Friday night came, John told me he was going to a party and invited me to come. I wanted to, but I was planning to use that evening to catch up on my work. That way I could enjoy the weekend without worrying. John and my other roommate went out, leaving me alone in our house. I was sitting at my desk writing a paper when a message came in on my phone. It was a picture from John. There was also a text message that said, "Is this her?" I looked at the image, and it appeared to be Dee standing among the crowd at a party. I messaged him back saying, "Yes, looks like her." John then replied and said, "We'll talk later." It was definitely an ominous text. I was worried about what he was going to tell me. My first thought was that she was there with another guy, and he was warning me that she was dating around. I know a lot of people do that, but it would have been a deal breaker for me. It was hard for me to get very much work done for the rest of the night, but I didn't have to wait long. It was only about 10 p.m. when my roommates came in through the door. As soon as I heard them come in, I went to greet them. John was a little drunk, but not too bad. He was able to compose himself and told me to have a seat on the couch. I was fully prepared to hear that my new love interest was with another guy. To be honest, I wasn't even that upset. It was just a single date. I was disappointed, but far from devastated. That wasn't what John told me, though. My roommate told me that Dee was drunk at the party, and she was bragging to a group of guys. She was talking about how she was planning to lure some guy to a park, and that some other guys were going to rob him. John thought it sounded familiar, so he snapped the picture in order to check with me. I could hardly believe it at first. Part of me thought it was just drunk rambling, but I couldn't take the risk. At the very least, Dee was a bad drunk, and that's pretty unattractive in itself. I pulled out the Tinder app to check my messages. I had one from her, and she said that she was looking forward to Saturday. I put my phone away, not wanting to deal with it at that moment. After sleeping on it, I decided on the best course of action. I sent a message to Dee confirming our date. I guess it was like a small payback for what she did to me. There was no cause to call the cops, because I couldn't prove anything. I doubt the police would have invested a lot of resources into a case like that anyway. It does make me wonder what would have happened if I walked her home on our first date. Maybe she was going to lead me down a dark alley or something. You may never know, but that girl was bad news for sure. I really got lucky on this one.